Well, let's continue the discussion on the City of Cape Town rail network takeover, the impact it may have on the city and, of course, on the users of that infrastructure. The Development Impact Fund CEO, Lorenzo Davids, joins us now. Lorenzo, good evening. What do you make of all of this?
Kathy, good afternoon. It's quite interesting. I'm a firm believer and supporter of the sort of investigation into the viability of a province or a metropolitan authority running rail. I think it's the right thing to do. I am concerned about who is doing this particular feasibility study. I think it's very critical that we know who is doing it. And secondly, that we understand where the cost will be proportioned to recover that investment for a province or a municipal authority to manage rail. So there's a lot of unknowns in this particular feature at the moment, and there's a lot of questions that must be asked. But I support the initiative.
Let's try and look a bit deeper into this question of who. What primarily concerns you? So are you worried about who in terms of the city? I think just earlier we heard from Rob, who said the tender for this feasibility studies, or those that will be running it, has already been approved. What most concerns you about that?
Yeah, I think early disclosure of who's doing the feasibility study is very important right now. I think because public transport is used by poor people primarily, we need to understand that poor people want to be assured that their interests are accommodated within this particular feasibility study. Let me give you an example. In 2020, Minister Tito Mboweni, post the pandemic, sort of coming out of lockdown, promised us that rail would be a key feature of private investment. He said that in the economic recovery plan, he promised that rail needs private investment. So there's no question about it. The Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement said in 2015, rail is important for Africa's recovery. But here's the concern. Who will pay for that? At the end of the day, how does the investors recover the investment? Now, if that investment is recovered by higher train fares for poor people, then that for us is problematic entirely. We can't then say the poor people who now have a great rail service because it's provincially managed or municipally managed, now must pay the cost of that investment. We are asking the state to not raise train fares for poor people as a means of recovering the cost of this investment. That's very, very important, Kathy.
Lorenzo, I put a question to Rob on that very issue of cost, because this is something that comes up a lot, right? You've got, let's say, in a province like Gauteng, we've got the Gautrain that is taking place, but often one of the biggest criticisms to a system like that is that it's just simply too expensive for the majority of people to be able to use on a day-to-day basis. He refutes the idea that private investment or private involvement necessarily means an increase in tariffs.
It's foolhardy to say it doesn't imply an increase in tariffs. Obviously, any investor is going to want to recover the money that they invested. So here's what I think the city should do, is to look at a partnership between Metro Rail and Transnet. And the city should also seek to do a feasibility study on how they can take Transnet's cargo services and privatize that as well, or get private investment for that as well, so that can offset some of the cost. So transporting grain and cars and wheat and motor parts and minerals out of this region to other parts of the city with a port here, you begin to build a viability infrastructure that can subsidize metro rail transport, passenger rail transport. If you simply focus on just passenger rail transport, you have to answer the question, who will pay for the cost recovery? Who pays for the investment recovery? So we have to answer those questions up front. And those are two fundamental questions, Kathy. A, who is doing the study? Is there sufficient poor sensitivity in the researchers who will do this, the compilers of the report? And secondly, is there a clear understanding of how this investment from private investors will be recovered?
Lorenzo, do you see this, I think, as an acknowledgement from government that they've tried what they could, but they're just not, capacitated enough to do what needs to be done and to get that infrastructure back up on its feet?
Absolutely. I think the disaster is just too big right now. I don't think the issue is resources and skill, Kathy, because one is there enough money to do this, and one, do we have the capacity to do this? This country have amazing people We've got the talent, we've got the resources, we've got the people. What we don't have is the capacity to put it all together into a sense-making solution. And I think what the city of Cape Town has done is what I fully support, is the sense-making solution. I think every province should consider this. I think every municipal infrastructure that wants to build a transit authority should consider this. It's about taking our resources and our skill sets, our personnel, and building them into a sense-making solutions team. So South Africa doesn't lack the capacity to do this. It's lacking our ability to bring all these moving parts together so that we can fix it quickly. What do we see now with Boksburg, Benoni, Netterich, and Langa stations is that these places are lying derelict now for months. When you have that kind of situation and you don't stabilize it, you begin to add to the chaos as a government because you are neglecting quickly fixing things. And that's what I think the problem is here. The government doesn't have the ability to quickly turn around on the solution side of leading our infrastructure recovery. And that's what the city of Cape Town has done, which I fully support.
Lorenzo, part of me is thinking it's rail today. What could it be tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the important question. Because there are other parts of this economy that will need that kind of intervention as well. You think of our harbors. You think of road transport. You think of other parts to the economy. So yeah, there are other issues that can be considered for this kind of investment as well. But here's the big risk. We are a country with about 75% of the population that depends on some kind of bailout support, granting, NGO involvement, government subsidization. We have a very small middle class that pays for everything. And government must be careful that we don't outsource the economy to private investors. And then the 75% of poor people in this country carries the burden to pay back that investment. That's very, very hard on poor people. And I think we need to go slow, but we need to go in this direction.
The Development Impact Fund CEO, Lorenzo Davids, let me thank you for your time and your contribution this evening.